Pressure has some of the best storytelling in any Roblox game I've ever played. From slowly revealing the inner workings of the Hadal Black Site to Sebastian's terrible origins to the horrifying anomalies spread throughout the game, Pressure's lore is quite a sight to behold. I've already made one video about Pressure, going through the game and experiencing it for the first time. However, Pressure is a game that rewards people who continue to return to the Hadal Black Site even after their mission is complete. Throughout the game, there are files that you can pick up, each of them revealing more and more information about the things that go bump in the facility. I'm such a sucker for storytelling like this. You can get the entire story of Pressure so far if you simply buy Sebastian's document and beat the game. However, there's so much more content in this game besides that, and in this video, I'm going to explain as much of it as I possibly can. But before we get into the nitty-gritty details of this terrifying game, let's talk about what is no doubt the reason a lot of you clicked on this video. Sebastian Solace. Being the only friendly character that you talk to, Sebastian provides the only safe haven from the horrors of the Hadal Black Site. In exchange for precious information, he'll even give you some useful items to help you out on your life-threatening trek to the crystal. In my previous video about Pressure, I mentioned this character as being one of this game's X factors. Why it's become such an instant cult classic on Roblox. Is it because of Gianni?
Being a fish is an important step on a person's life.
Yes. However, the lore of Roblox Pressure goes far deeper than one may initially think. And in this video, I'm going to explain as much of it as I possibly can. So let's dive in and see what we can find. To say this game is heavily inspired by the SCP universe is an understatement. A secret underwater base containing God knows how many terrifying and deadly anomalies, a criminal sent there to retrieve something important, sounds pretty familiar to me. However, to understand the lore of Pressure, we first need to understand the nexus of this entire game, a mysterious corporation known as Urban Shade. Urban Shade is essentially the foundation that holds anomalous entities and researches their power, and the Hadal Black Site, aka the building that you, the player, travel through during a run, is the largest and most fascinating site that Urban Shade owns. The Hadal Black Site is no ordinary complex. You see, in case you were wondering why you need to travel there by submarine, it's because the Hadal Black Site is approximately 67,320 studs beneath the surface of the ocean. Studs being the unit of measurement in the world of Roblox. Why such a specific number? Well, it's because this depth marks the beginning of what's known as the Let Van Zone. The Let Van Zone is an anomaly in itself. At that depth, the pressure would crush literally anything and kill anyone who wasn't in a already pressurized cabin, i.e. a submarine. However, the Let Van Zone is special because after crossing the 67,320 stud mark, the ocean's pressure seemingly vanishes. Fish that are only found on the surface of the ocean can live here peacefully without fear of the depths crushing them. After this was discovered by scientists in 1961 when a cargo ship sunk east of Iceland, Urban Shade quickly swooped in and prevented this knowledge from reaching the public, and only 1 year later, the Hadal Black Site began construction. I mean, what better a place to contain anomalous entities than the bottom of the ocean? Now, Urban Shade isn't exactly the most philanthropic organization out there. Their attempts to harness the powers of the anomalies they've captured has led to some unfortunate incidents. After the Hadal Black Site was fully operational, they could finally begin their true work. Human experiments. You see, Urban Shade, while holding these anomalous beings, began work on an experiment to give human beings the ability to breathe underwater by literally giving them gills. A horrifying thought to most, but not to Urban Shade. However, to do this, they needed test subjects, but they couldn't exactly post a listing on Glassdoor for human rights violating experiments. No, they needed people who didn't matter to the rest of society. They needed people who were cast aside and left to rot. They needed the absolute bottom of the barrel individuals that nobody would ever miss. They needed someone expendable. But you know who isn't expendable? All of you, but only if you subscribe to my channel.
Can you believe it, guys?
The elusive Roblox Video Star program.
Just a week away.
And at the rate we're going, I believe that we can do it. So if you've been enjoying this video and want to see more like it, click that subscribe button. It's completely free, no strings attached. Anyway, back to the video. This is where everyone's favorite poster boy comes in, Sebastian Solace. Sebastian was sentenced to death without the possibility of parole for the supposed murder of 9 people. Urban Shade saw this as an opportunity, and before they could bring the hammer down on Sebastian, he was whisked away by Urban Shade. However, to keep the media quiet, he was still pronounced dead by the government. And to be honest, death would have been a much better fate for our friend Sebastian than what Urban Shade had planning in the shadows. They quickly began their experiments on Sebastian, injecting him with DNA from a blue whale, a sea snake, a great white shark, a mutated anglerfish, a silver spiny fin, and a mantis shrimp, along with a mysterious, presumably anomalous entity. This naturally caused Sebastian to undergo some of the most painful mutations a human being could ever possibly fathom, losing both of his legs and having them replaced by a massive tail and growing a third arm just below his left. After this transformation, Sebastian could, in fact, breathe underwater. However, the mutations were so great that Urban Shade deemed him a lost cause and sent him to the Hadal Black site for monitoring. This experiment was later refined for future subjects, but the damage was done, and Sebastian was not happy. During the journey to the Hadal Black site, Sebastian managed to feign the effects of a tranquilizer, no doubt because the researchers didn't really know how powerful he had become. He then murdered an elite guard and stole his badge. This allowed Sebastian full access to the entirety of the Hadal Black site. I made a joke in my previous pressure video about the description of the Uneasy Alliance badge. The badge for doing business with that guy. The description says, "The only reason why you're playing this game," which is probably the most self-aware dev comment I've seen about this, and how I thought it was a simple joke by the developers on how obsessed the player base was with this character, but it actually has a double meaning. The only reason why you're playing this game is quite literal as a statement, as Sebastian was the one who set free all of the hostile anomalous entities that we see throughout the game. In an act of revenge, Sebastian essentially caused the destruction of the entire Hadal Black site, meaning that Urban Shade personnel were no longer able to work there safely. This is where you, the player, come in. Similarly to how Urban Shade needed criminals and vagabonds for their horrifying experiments, they now need similar individuals to retrieve a very special crystal inside the deepest and oldest parts of the Hadal Black site. Now, this is obviously a horrible thing that Urban Shade is doing. They clearly aren't willing to risk their own personnel, but sure, just throw 10,000 prisoners into the fire. What could possibly go wrong? However, for Sebastian, this is a dream come true. Scattered around the Black site, there are files, DNA tubes, and USB drives that contain juicy information about Urban Shade. We as the player have no real use for these, as we're simply there to retrieve a crystal and escape. But for Sebastian, this information is worth its weight in gold. He clearly has ulterior motives when it comes to enacting his revenge upon Urban Shade, and this data is going to help him do just this. This is what people consider to be the quote-unquote main story of Pressure. An expendable prisoner goes on a journey into the Hadal Black site to retrieve a crystal while inadvertently helping someone who is actively trying to destroy Urban Shade from the inside. It's a surprisingly well thought out and interesting story that I hope gets improved upon as the game gets updated. But there are more layers to this game. That stuff is pretty straightforward. It's a simple revenge story. But as you play this game more and more, you find more and more files that you can pick up, each revealing another mechanic of this world. This can include information about the anomalies that you come across in your travels, as well as information about Urban Shade itself. The Hadal Black site has quite a substantial amount of secrets to unveil that help paint a picture as to what's really going on in this game. For example, in the most recent Friendly Fire update, a new character was added named The Painter, a sentient art program on an old 80s computer that can outperform even the most cutting edge of supercomputers. Painter was ripped from his home after Urban Shade accidentally murdered his creator during a questioning. Personnel then transported Painter to the Hadal Black site to use it for mining cryptocurrency. Painter clearly didn't want this, so it hacked the site's internal defense system after Sebastian released the anomalies. This takes the form of turrets that try to murder the player when they spot them. These turrets can be shut off, much to the dismay of Painter. But why? Why does Painter want the player to die so badly? Well, that's because of, once again, 1. Sebastian. There are voice lines in the game that hint at Painter's supposed trust in Sebastian to get them both out of the black site and escape. Painter doesn't want to mine crypto for all eternity, and Sebastian wants freedom to wreak as much havoc on Urban Shade as physically possible. This is why Painter doesn't want the player to retrieve the crystal. If they do, there's a high likelihood that Urban Shade will simply move on from the Hadal black site and leave both him and Sebastian to rot. But there's even more to Urban Shade than these characters and their motives. At the end of the game, when the giant robot saves us from the searchlights, we can find a document that tells us what exactly they are. This robot is called a trench bleeder, and their only purpose is to bleed the trenches of the Letvan zone dry of their natural resources. Once this task is complete, all of the trench bleeders will be scrapped for parts, save for one. Lucy, the very same trench bleeder that saves us at the end of every run. There's definitely a lot more going on here, but it's still not enough to put together a full picture. This and many other documents you find in the black site mention another character, one of the only other named characters whose name isn't blacked out, Mr. Shade. Presumably the current CEO or president or owner in some capacity of Urban Shade, a mysterious person who lurks in the shadows and the singular entity that wants the crystal. Obviously this Mr. Shade is important, as why else would Urban Shade send God knows how many expendables to the black site in hopes of getting it back? Judging by the amount of blacked out spaces, we can assume that expendables who are successful in their endeavor will be rewarded with at least $1 million. It's in stark contrast as to how willing Urban Shade is to kill off any expendables that get too curious. Going off the beaten path results in your diving gear, or PDG, putting a bullet in your brain, and even getting too close to a radio frequency can cause it to go off. Obviously, there's a lot more about this crystal that we don't know, but it's very clearly important to Mr. Shade. But there's even more completely unexplained things in the Hadal black site. For example, J123, aka the Mindscape, a mysterious place beyond this physical realm where nobody can return once they've been taken there. There's also the mysterious Mr. Lopi, an entity that teleports you to wherever your teammates are if you take too long. The only document that Sebastian refuses to show you, no matter how many times you die, is his. There's a theory going around right now that questions whether or not Sebastian is truly an agent of chaos or if he's been hired by this Mr. Low-P character. I could go on about every tiny little detail, like the new imaginary friend remote that is literally one of the most terrifying things in any game I've ever experienced. Do I pick this up?
Thank you for using our limited-time imaginary friend remote. We hope you enjoy the next 2 days with your very own real, not-so-imaginary friend.
I hate you so much. I've never hated a thing in a video game more than this thing. And it talks.
Where are you going?
I'm gonna get jump scared by this thing so many times, dude. Yo, you seeing this? Or the nexus of these mysterious void puddles that find themselves in lockers. But if I were to go over literally every single document in this game, it would take a very, very long time. So I'm just going to say this. There is so much more to uncover in this game. And I hope that as Pressure receives more content, we will receive more story. Because unlike Doors, this game has a story. It has lore. It has an X factor. And it has even more potential. So, thanks for watching.
Can you hear me?
Yes. I'm supposed to raw.
How are you doing?
Not good. And it's your fault. And I'll see you all next time. Peace.